Now, let's get straight into it. Should Meghan and Harry have taxpayer-funded police protection? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Now, two former Home Secretaries have called for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to be given a limited and temporary security package if they return to Britain until their long-term plans are a little clearer.
Lord Blunkett says that there's a happy medium, giving the family a medium level of protection, which would then be reviewed, either increased or reduced, depending on the threat that they face.
But as we know, Harry and Meghan chose to step back as working royals, so should the taxpayer have to pay to protect them when they come back as private citizens?
Or if there's a genuine threat to them or their children, does it simply make sense to give them police protection? Tskenya, what do you think? Do you think the taxpayer should be footing this bill?
Yeah, I think we need a RAVIC review to see what the threat level is. I mean, I've never run a review like that or a risk assessment generally. And I can just say from the things that I've seen online, the way in which the press has hounded them and individuals hound them, I think there is a real threat to them as a family. I do agree with the Lord that says that we should review this maybe every 6 to 12 months. And if it is just a thing that we do for a short amount of time, I think we should do that as taxpayers. At the end of the day, they step back as royals, but it doesn't take away the privilege
to procure what we need for that particular subject. So in terms of police protection, as you rightly said, Harry and Meghan chose to step away from becoming working royals. They then trashed the royal family, absolutely commoditised to the nth degree everything they could squeeze out of their royal connection and patronage in order to do the Netflix drama and the Oprah interview and Spare the book and all the other things, you know. And now, for whatever reason, he's coming back. Now, I'm all for olive branches, and that's wonderful if he wants to build bridges with his family and the children can get to know their little cousins. Great, wonderful. If somebody says sorry, it's a wonderful starting point, and I would never negate that. However, if he's going to then use commercially all those associations, all the things you say, he's got royal blood, the huge interest there is in them, and we see them rocking up at some place where they're going to be public speakers and they're charging, why should we be paying for that? I think it has to be done on a case-by-case basis, maybe at a public event for the public good, where the security threat is assessed properly, and there is a clear understanding of, is there a need for them to be protected? Yes, he is. He's not actually a member of the royal family anymore.
He still has royal blood.
But
it doesn't matter.
Choice.
Hang on, he is a member of the royal family.
He's not.
He might not be a working royal.
Right, I beg your pardon.
But he's not only is he a member of the royal family, but he's also in the top 10 in line to the throne.
Yeah.
How would it look for this country if it's not able to protect someone who
could be possibly our future
could have to step onto the throne?
Look, that somebody that is in line to the throne has done all the things that I said he did.
But also, Angela,
he caused immense grief to people who couldn't answer back because of protocol or for whatever reason. I'm keen for a new chapter. It's not because I want to drag the grievance into the next decade. What I'm saying, from a purely practical perspective, if there is a clear, robust evidence that there is some kind of security threat, God forbid, to them or their family, you're right, that needs to be assessed and looked at clearly.
Which there is.
But this idea, plenty of people in public life go about their daily business who've become very famous, who pay for their own security.
They haven't been maligned in the same way that Harry and Meghan have.
Harry invited that.
Harry didn't invite that. And this is just my opinion, Angela, but let's think about why they were driven out of the UK. I personally think they were driven out of the UK because they were used as scapegoats to cover up for other nefarious things that was happening. I think Prince Andrew is one of those things. I don't think they would have had to have left to go to California if they were given the right support from the family in the way they should have, for the racism that Meghan faced, for the scrutiny that Harry faced.
Yes.
Not alleged, come on. We understand what Britain is as an institution. I think some of the hate that is wielded at Meghan and Harry is because she's not an English rose.
Look,
it's rooted in envy and jealousy.
On the cesspit of social media, there were some utterly unforgivable racist remarks.
And also from the family themselves, questioning the colour of the child.
But that has. But where is the robust evidence of who said that? It was her, she versus him. Maybe it was said. Maybe it was not. We're not in a position to judge that.
Do you think Harry would lie on his family and say that his family were saying things that were potentially racist and microaggressive?
After what?
I think Harry understands the world of those claims.
After what Harry has done, the other thing that I would say to you is that I think you should go back and look, or anybody invested in this debate, go back and look at the press coverage when Harry first started going out with Meghan. There was a reservoir of goodwill for all the things you say about, this is this old institution, it's
lasted
fusty,
5 minutes,
it's set in its ways. We were Team Harry. We wanted it to work. We wanted it to work.
What I'm hearing is just arguments over whether we sort of like Harry and Meghan or not.
About that.
And surely it's not about that.
It
surely
isn't,
whether they get
brought up.
But probably surely whether they get protection or not is down to whether they face genuine threat. Prince Andrew, for example, is a good thing to bring up at this point because he doesn't get police protection. It's former Prince Andrew, I'm being told. It's very hard to break those sort of common phrases. Andrew doesn't get police protection anymore. King Charles pays for his private protection. Harry's already said he's willing to pay. Maybe they just get private protection and...
They can get private protection, but I think until we work out what the level of threat is, which I think is a dire level of threat towards this family, I think that the taxpayer should pay for it. And if it isn't the taxpayer that pays for it, then maybe his father should, the royal house should, in the same way that they pay for Prince Andrew. If we can't pay for that, former Prince Andrew, if we can't pay for them, but we've been able to pay for other people and wield other people for 10, 15 years, and this is just a family that ran out of the country because of how they were treated by the press and those within the royal house, I think it's fair.
Squaddies, I need you to sit down for this one, because what just happened on British daytime television might be one of the most important 5 minutes of pro-Sussex television we have seen all year. And it didn't even come from a Sussex supporter's mouth. It came from a panel booked almost certainly to do the opposite. Here's the setup. 2 former Home Secretaries, people who have literally run the Home Office, people who understand threat assessments better than anyone shouting on Twitter ever will, came out this week and said Harry and Meghan should get a limited temporary security package if they return to Britain. Not full-time, not forever. A reviewed, reassessed, evidence-based level of protection while the picture becomes clearer. That's it. That's the ask. And naturally, the British media could not simply report that story. They had to turn it into a debate. They had to book a panel, put a countdown clock on the screen, flash a phone number underneath it like it's a phone-in about bin collection days, and ask the nation, should the taxpayer fund security for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? But here's what the producers did not see coming. They put Tskenya-Sarah Frazer in that chair, expecting, I assume, a nice, tidy little clash. What they got instead was a masterclass in dismantling bad faith arguments in real time, and it is going straight into the receipts folder. So let's lay out exactly what's on the table, because context is everything here, and the rota loves to strip context out until a story sounds worse than it is. Lord Blunkett, a former Home Secretary, a man who has sat in the room where actual threat assessments get made, proposed what he called a happy medium. A medium level of protection, reviewed every 6 to 12 months, adjusted up or down depending on the actual evidenced threat level. This is not radical. This is not special treatment pulled out of thin air. This is how risk assessment works for literally every high-profile figure this country protects, from former prime ministers to former royals to visiting dignitaries. And that's the detail the derangers conveniently skip past every single time this story comes up. Britain is currently funding protection for multiple former prime ministers. Nobody is running a segment asking whether taxpayers should really be footing that bill decades after they left office. Nobody is putting Tony Blair's security detail up for a public vote. But the second Harry's name enters the conversation, suddenly it's a national outrage. Suddenly it's a referendum on whether the money is deserved. That's not a security conversation. That's a vibes conversation dressed up as a security conversation. And Tskenya called that exact thing out, live on air. Now, I'm going to do something the rota never does for us. I'm going to actually give the other side's argument its full fair shape before I take it apart. Because if we only ever fight straw men, we don't win anything. We just feel good for 20 minutes. Angela Epstein's position, boiled down, was essentially this. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties voluntarily. In stepping back, they also, in her framing, monetised the very connections and platform that come from being royal. The Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the memoir, public speaking engagements where, yes, they are paid. Her argument is that you cannot simultaneously cash in on the royal brand commercially and expect the taxpayer to underwrite your physical safety for free, especially when other high-profile private citizens, people who are by any measure extremely famous, pay for their own protection out of pocket every single day. On the surface, if you know nothing else, that sounds like a coherent position. It sounds fiscally responsible. It sounds fair. That's exactly why it plays so well on television and exactly why it needs to be picked apart properly instead of just shouted down. Here's where it falls apart, squaddies, and here's where Tskenya did the work that a lot of paid pundits refused to do. First, the security risk Harry carries didn't start when he sat down with Oprah. It didn't start with Spare. It started the moment he was born, as the son of the head of state, as a member of the line of succession, as a target the second his mother's name became a global obsession that ended in a Paris underpass. That risk is inherited by birth, not opted into by book deals. You do not get to retroactively erase decades of institutional and inherited risk just because the person eventually spoke honestly about how they were treated. Second, and this is the point that actually mattered most, the reason Harry has a security risk in the first place is directly tied to his service to this country and to the institution. 2 tours in Afghanistan, years of royal duty, engagements, public representation of the crown on the global stage, all of which built the very profile that now makes him a target. You cannot use someone's service as the justification for the risk they now carry, and then turn around and use their honesty about mistreatment as the justification for denying them protection from that same risk. That's not logic. That's punishment dressed up as policy. Tskenya named it exactly right. It's vindictive. Third, and this is the part the rota really does not want front and centre, race. Tskenya didn't tiptoe around it, and neither will we. She pointed directly at the fact that Meghan and Harry were, in her words, run out of the country, not just by the tabloid press, but by dynamics within the family itself, and that racism was a real, documented factor in that departure. Not alleged in some vague, deniable way. Documented, reported, lived by the people it happened to. And watch what happens the second that word enters the room. Suddenly, the tone shifts from policy debate to defensiveness. Suddenly, it's where's the robust evidence? As if microaggressions and institutional racism come with a signed confession and a court transcript. As if Meghan herself, on record, describing conversations about the colour of her unborn child, isn't evidence enough. As if the sheer volume of coded, racially loaded coverage this woman received from the day she stepped into public life isn't sitting right there in the archive for anyone willing to actually look. That's the trick, squaddies. Demand a standard of proof for racism that you would never demand for a security threat, and then act shocked when the conversation gets emotional. It's not emotional, it's exhausted. There's a difference. Let's talk about Prince Andrew for 1 second, because his name came up in that discussion, and it is, frankly, the single most damning comparison available. Andrew, a man stripped of his titles, a man whose association with Jeffrey Epstein is a matter of public record, a man who settled a civil sexual abuse case out of court. His father, the king, personally pays for his private protection. Nobody is running a phone-in asking whether that's appropriate. Nobody is putting a countdown clock on that story. There is no panel show demanding the nation vote on whether Andrew deserves safety. But Harry, a working royal who served his country in uniform, who has never faced anything remotely resembling the allegations his uncle has faced, who is simply asking for a reviewed, evidence-based temporary level of protection while visiting the country of his birth. Harry gets the public trial. Harry gets the phone-in. Harry gets Twitter users debating whether he's earned the right to not get shot. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about what's actually driving this conversation, nothing will. And squaddies, you were not having any of it either. The replies underneath this clip absolutely torch the framing. One commenter pointed out something that should be obvious, but apparently isn't to the rotor. Harry was born the son of the head of state. He inherited these risks at birth, the same way King Charles inherited his. That's not a lifestyle choice. That's a fact of his existence. Another pointed out the sheer irony of British presenters constantly bringing up Oprah, Netflix and Spare, joking that the Sussexes should get paid every single time a presenter name drops those projects on air. Because let's be honest, it happens in nearly every single segment about them, whether it's relevant or not. Someone else called out the rewriting of history happening in real time, and honestly, they're right. This has been happening since day one. The narrative keeps shifting, keeps finding a new angle, keeps finding a new reason, but the destination is always the same. Deny them peace, deny them safety, deny them the benefit of the doubt that gets extended to literally everyone else in a comparable position. And one comment in particular deserves a highlight, because it captured the racial double standard in one devastating sentence. Had Meghan been Jewish instead of biracial, the same commentator demanding evidence of bigotry would likely be calling for the SAS to guard her personally. That's the kind of clarity that cuts through hours of manufactured debate in a single line. Here's why this particular clip matters more than most, squaddies. It's not just that Tskenya won an argument on live television, although she absolutely did. It's that she did it using the exact toolkit this institution and its media allies rely on to survive. Emotional deflection, selective memory, and a demand for evidence that conveniently only ever applies when Meghan and Harry are the ones asking for basic human safety. She stayed calm. She stayed factual. She brought up the inherited risk, the service record, the racism, the Andrew comparison, all without raising her voice once. And it worked, because the truth, laid out plainly next to itself, simply holds up better than manufactured outrage does. This is what accountability looks like when it actually happens on mainstream television instead of just in our replies and our comment sections. And it should be a blueprint. Every time this topic resurfaces, and it will resurface because the tabloids will not let it go, this is the standard. Inherited risk, service-linked threat, documented racism, the Andrew double standard, 4 receipts every single time, no exceptions. So here's where I land on this, squaddies. The question was never really, should the taxpayer fund security for Harry and Meghan? The real question, the one nobody on that panel wanted to say out loud except Tskenya, is whether this country is willing to protect a member of its own royal family the same way it protects everyone else in a comparable position, or whether the price of speaking an inconvenient truth about how you were treated is forfeiting your right to safety altogether. We know the answer we believe in. And clips like this one are exactly why this channel exists. To pull the receipts out from underneath the manufactured outrage and hold them up to the light. If this broke it down for you the way it broke it down for me, hit that subscribe button right now, because we track every single one of these panel shows, every single derangement, every single moment the mask slips. And we are not going anywhere. Drop your take in the comments. Was Tskenya right? Or is Angela's fiscal argument stronger than we're giving it credit for? I want to see this comment section absolutely full today. Until next time, squaddies, stay sharp, stay logical, and keep the receipts close.